Well, good morning, everybody. Today is August 25th, 2018, and we are here with Jill Patterson, who, what is your official title? Branch manager?
Senior branch librarian.
Senior branch librarian.
I say branch manager because nobody knows what a senior branch librarian is.
Okay.
Everybody knows what a branch manager is.
Jill, let's start off a little bit. Tell me a little bit about where you're born and, that kind of stuff.
Born in Roslyn Heights, New York.
Uh-huh.
Moved to California. We moved a lot, actually, before we came to California, between New York and New Jersey. Lots of moves. And then we moved to California when I was 4.5 years old. And I spent the first, let me see, how old was I? 14 years in Pomona. So I grew up in Pomona.
You grew up in Pomona?
And then we moved to Claremont because of the school district. And I went to Claremont High, went to Mount Sac, went to UC Riverside, went to UC Santa Cruz for my final undergraduate year, and my master's is from UC Berkeley.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your childhood. Tell us some little tidbits about that.
Okay, I grew up in Pomona when it was, General Dynamics was the biggest employer, and the Pomona Mall was the biggest shopping area. This is before the Montclair Plaza. It was known nationally because it was a walking mall, but it was outdoors. And my favorite memories, we used to, we never locked the house. We went to Ganesha Park all day, swimming lessons in the morning, then back in the afternoon for a picnic, and then swimming in the afternoon. My mom hated this. And every weekend we would go to the beach, Huntington Beach, before we would go down Beach Boulevard. Through Carbon Canyon. Remember the hot springs? Do you remember the hot springs?
Yeah, Levita Hot Springs.
Yes, we took my grandmother there when she came out to visit. I'd never been in a hot springs before. That was very cool. And there used to be a truck right on the other side of Carbon Canyon where you could buy watermelon. And our way back from the beach, we would buy watermelon. But we would ride our bikes all day. My parents had no idea what we were doing. And the wash, we had a wash just a block away that we could walk along. It was not concrete. Several years later, they put concrete along the sides. I mean, it was just all concreted up. It was a flood control channel. But before that, it was a wash, and we used to just play there and make forts and hike along there. It was just one of the best childhoods ever.
So what did your parents do for a living?
My dad was an engineer. My mom stayed home until my youngest brother went to school, and then she went back to school. She went to Mount Sac, and she was in the second graduating nursing class, and she was an RN. She worked at a bunch of different hospitals, Pomona Valley, she at Queen of the Valley, she was at San Antonio, and her last job was at Park Avenue Hospital in Pomona, and when they closed down, she was one of the people they asked to help close it down, and that's when she retired.
How many siblings did you have?
I have two younger brothers.
Two younger brothers. So what is your fondest memory during your childhood?
Going to the library every week, and I was allowed to check out 6 books. We would go on a Saturday, and I'd come home and stack the books in the order I wanted to read them, and I'd have them all read by Sunday. And I'd have to wait a week to go back to the library.
So since your early childhood, you had a big interest in reading in the library.
I had my own library at home. We had a garage that had like a tool shed next to it. My dad did, it was his workshop, and in front of that was another room which we used as our playhouse, but I turned it into a library. That was my library, and I even started typing catalog cards on my typewriter.
Why do you suppose you had such an interest in reading and library?
My family were all readers. Everybody. My parents were big readers. We couldn't afford to buy that many books. Back then, I remember that hardback books for kids were 59 cents, and my allowance was 25 cents. So it would take me a couple of weeks to save up to buy a book. So we used the library all the time. It was just a real important part of our lives.
What was some of your favorite books you read back then?
Oh, the Nancy Drew series, the Hardy Boy series, the Trixie Belden series, every book on fantasy that I could read, the career books for young women, that was a whole series of those books, horse books, every mystery book. I just read voraciously. And I would, back then in the elementary school, I went to a Royal Elementary School, the teachers would be able to get like a bunch of books from the library for their classroom. I would go through all of them, and they would never go back and get new ones during the year. And I would always ask them, please go back to the library and bring back some more books. They didn't. When I went to junior high, Marshall Junior High School in Pomona, they had a library there, a real library.
Yeah.
And I remember the librarian telling me one time, she says, "You're reading too much fiction. I want you to read some other books." And she pulled out a stack of books, nonfiction books for me to read, which I did, and really widened my horizons. But I think maybe that was the first time I realized that librarians actually did something besides, I thought they just checked out the books.
What knowledge do you get from reading, or what do you get out of reading so much?
Adventure. I think that's one of the reasons I love to travel. Ideas, tolerance. I mean, you're reading about all different kinds of people. Understanding how people think different ways and have different beliefs. Learning how to do things. We transferred, we moved to Claremont, and so I went from a junior high in ninth grade junior high to ninth grade at a high school at Claremont High. And they had a Russian class, and I thought, I'm going to take Russian. Well, they'd already been in session for a couple of weeks, so I went to the library and found a book in the children's section called Fun with Russian, and I read through that, and I was caught up in a week because of that. So the library was my go-to place if I wanted to learn about anything.
What's the most favorite book you've ever read?
Oh my gosh, I cannot give you a single favorite book.
Really?
I have lots of favorite books. Beauty by Robin McKinley. It's a retelling of the Beauty and the Beast legend, but without the mean stepsisters. The stepsisters are loving and gorgeous and, spoil beauty. So that's one of my favorites. Any Agatha Christie book. I love Agatha Christie, the Queen of Mysteries. She's fabulous. Clifford Simak, he's an old science fiction writer, and I really liked his books. Oh gosh. I collect Sue-Ann Jafarian. She has a couple of different mystery series. Georgette Heyer. She never thought of herself as a romance writer. She thought of herself as historical fiction, but I love the dialogue in her books.
So even today, are you still an avid reader?
Oh gosh, yes. You should see my house. My dad, when I first moved down into my own apartment, built me 2 4-foot wide, 6-foot high bookshelves, which I still have. And I won't tell you how many more bookshelves I have. I have piles of books. Every room, even in the bathrooms, there are books in my bathroom. I have a separate bookcase just for my cookbooks. I have separate bookcase for my children's books, a separate bookcase for my young adult books. I have a separate bookcase for my mysteries. I have separate bookcases for my science fiction and fantasy. I have a whole bookcase for my romance because I love romance.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your high school years. Tell me about high school for you.
I went to Claremont High School, and it was the first time I had a group of really good friends that we were together all through high school. Claremont High was different in that they had what they called the module system, which meant you had free periods during the day where you could do whatever you wanted. And they had a library, and I remember the library had a sunken reading area, and a favorite prank of the high school seniors was to flood that. They would come in through the skylight right above it, and they would flood that with water. But we had a great librarian there who showed me all kinds of books. They had language classes. I took Spanish and Russian, and I took a independent study with French. I got to help I was a teacher's assistant, and I remember when my Russian teacher was out sick, I got to teach the class because they could never get a substitute to that new Russian. So I got to do that. That was one of my favorite memories. And so I always thought I was going to be a teacher. I really loved doing that. I loved being a teacher. I graduated high school in 3 years. I figured out I could do that.
3 years?
3 years. I was 16 when I graduated.
Okay.
And went to, and that's when my parents said, well, I don't think you're really ready for a 4-year college. Go to a junior college. So I went to Mount Sac, where my mom went and where my daughter went, by the way.
Okay.
And it was a great decision because in junior college, teachers are paid to teach, not do research. So I had my worst teacher there, but also all my best teachers were at the junior college.
So 3 years and you went to the junior college, huh?
I was out of there in 3 semesters and went to UC Riverside and loved that school. That was an amazing experience. My first time away from home because I lived in the dorm. And then my last semester was a summer session at UC Santa Cruz because they had a special linguistics institute, and we had people from all over the world that attended that institute. And so I graduated like a week after my 20th birthday.
Wow. Growing up, who would you say had the biggest influence in your life?
My parents.
Uh-huh.
My parents, I couldn't have asked for better parents. They said, you can do whatever you want to do, but whatever you do, you better be the best damn person at that, even if you were digging ditches.
Uh-huh.
They never said I couldn't do something. When I was going to build my own roller skates, my dad showed me how to use his woodworking equipment so I could do that. He never said that was a stupid idea. They never said that. They were always encouraged to me, and they always believed in me.
How was life in the dorms?
I had a great roommate. In fact, because I started in the spring semester, and then we roomed together the following year. And I was at Lothian, which was the all-girls dorm, which was, it was great. I loved it. I worked in food service my last year, my full year there, and I worked at the A&I Aberdeen Inverness, which was the co-ed dorm. And I can remember, I started out serving the food, and the food was awful, not like it is today.
Was that the first job you ever had?
No, when I went to Mount Sac, I actually worked there. I actually helped one time with registration, but I also, do you remember doing inventory? Have you ever done inventory?
Yeah, I have in retail. I've done inventory.
Yes, in retail, exactly.
Yes.
So that was one of the jobs I got, where you go after the store closed, sometimes while the store was open, but usually at night, and you counted things. You didn't even know half the time what you were counting. I had to ask, what is this? And it was all done manually, and that was one of the jobs I had. I babysat from the time I was 12 years old, and we, used to babysit lots of weekends. So my first job as a regular more than one night type thing, that would have been working in the food service. And I served the food, and I couldn't stand serving this awful food, so I said I want to be a dishwasher. So I was a professional dishwasher.
So what did that teach you, having these humbling jobs to serve food in a dishwasher?
This is why I went to college, because I took a year off between my undergraduate and graduate, because I graduated college so quickly. I couldn't have applied for graduate school. And I can remember spending 6 weeks in a factory screwing toilet parts together. And all these other women there was all women. There was one person my age who was also going to go to college, and the rest were women, and that was their life. They were not going to ever do anything else but that kind of work. And I'm going, this is why I'm going to college, so I can do something that will make more of a difference, where I can use my brain.
And what was your major in college?
I started as a Spanish major, and then I was a linguistics major.
So today, do you speak Spanish?
I speak enough Spanish that they wanted to transfer me to another branch in El Toro, the El Toro branch, because they needed a Spanish-speaking person. And there are only, right now, 3 Spanish-speaking branch managers in the system.
So at what point in your life did you decide you wanted to become a librarian?
Well, you would think it would have been obvious, right? It was not obvious. It was at UC Riverside with my dishwashing job. One of my fellow dishwashers told me he was going to the University of Washington to get his MLS degree, and I'm going, what? And he said, yeah, I'm going to be a librarian. I thought, librarian? That's a job. I think I want to do that. So I did some research, and Berkeley was the only one that was accredited in the state that was a 1-year program. UCLA was a 2-year program, and I was, theirs was 4 quarters. I did it in 3 quarters, so I graduated when I was 21 with my master's.
You're 21.
Yep, just before.
And what was your first job in the library field?
Well, in the year between my undergraduate and graduate school, I was a substitute branch library assistant for San Bernardino County, which meant I got called and I worked in a lot of the branches in San Bernardino: Fontana, Rialto, Bloomington, Chino. That was a really interesting experience. That was the first time I realized that libraries selected books, and there were certain books you weren't allowed to have. San Bernardino did not allow paperbacks at that time. You weren't allowed to have paperbacks.
Is that because they would get damaged, or
I don't know what the reason was. But I can remember working at Chino Library one night, and they said we had to pack up all the paperback books because we're getting a visit from headquarters, and they'll confiscate them. And actually, they did a surprise visit sometime later, and they did confiscate all those books. Now they have a new, after I left, they had a new county librarian who changed that completely. But it's when you realize, that was the first time I realized that, wow, there are some books, you know, you can't have in a, they wouldn't let you have in a library. And not for the content, but because of the format.
Yeah. So tell me about those early years in your career. Tell me a little bit about what you learned and the people you worked with and that kind of thing.
It's interesting what a small community libraries are, because at that first job, one of the branch managers, he co-branch manager with another person, was Terry Pringle. And when I came to Orange County, he was a branch manager here. I hadn't seen him in, 20 years? And I met him here just before he retired. But I think working at that library for the county was eye-opening because of the kinds of reference questions we got that I didn't realize libraries got. I had somebody come and say, how do you sew up a football? You know, how do you lace up the football? And it's like, okay. So you would get when I worked on Ontario, somebody said, well, how can we make our own dog food? We would get all kinds of questions. One of my favorite questions at Ontario was this woman who was researching her family. She had, her mother had several kids by different fathers and had essentially left them to be adopted. And so she was searching for her siblings. Her mother had died, and I think her father had also died. So, but she had gone to a private eye, and he had told her, this is how you can do it yourself, because it's going to be too expensive if I do it. And so she was using the library, and she was telling me, I found one sister, and she lives on the East Coast, so she's looking for siblings on the East Coast, and I'm looking for siblings on the West Coast. Remember, this is in the days before cell phones, before computers, before internet. It was all paper.
So about what year was it around that you got your first job at the library?
At the library, okay, that would have been 1972.
Okay. So you've done this for well over 40 years.
Yeah.
Wow. And then from that first library job, what did you do next?
Well, then I went to graduate school, came back, and got my first professional job at Ontario City Library with an insane director.
And what was your position there?
I was in charge of reference.
Okay.
So I was in charge of
and
reference.
what does that mean?
That means I was at the information desk, and I answered questions.
Okay.
Help people find things. I worked Wednesday through Sunday. My days off were Monday and Tuesday. So I worked every weekend. On Saturday and Sunday, I was the only librarian. So I was also in charge of the library. And so that meant I supervised as well. And you know, I answered questions. I would help out at the checkout desk. I got to help out at Children's because I wanted to learn everything. You know, my goal when I decided to become a librarian is I wanted to work in every kind of library there was. I didn't care about being a director. Some people just want this upward course and they're going to be a director. I wanted the variety and the experience.
And what year was this around when you got your first professional?
1974.
74. So back then there was very little in the way of technology.
There was no technology.
Okay.
We didn't even have fax machines. We had something I think called teletype. Because but we were still cooperative. I was part of the Inland Library System. You know, our library was where we cooperated with all these libraries, and we would have like lend books out to other libraries, and answer reference questions. That's when LA Public Library was our reference center, and if we had a question we couldn't answer, we would actually go up we would send it on to LA Public Library, and they would give us the answer. And I remember actually getting to go to LAPL one day as just to see because of my position as the system librarian for that 1 year, to see what it was like working there and to help answer those questions. And that's when I found out there was such a thing as closed stacks, where I got to go behind the public area where all the rest of the books were.
Okay. So tell us about those early years of how things were organized and how you had to look up
catalog
stuff.
cards, catalog cards, and reference books.
Okay.
Our reference collection here is like this, as opposed to what it used to be. So you had to look everything up was in books. There was our magazines, and when you wanted to look up a magazine article, you had to go to the green, what we call the green books, the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. And I remember trying to teach a high school teacher how to use it, and he told me it was too difficult. I'm thinking, gosh, I've been using these since I was in high school. They're not so difficult to use. But that's how you would find magazine articles. So everything was paper. It was, you had to really do a lot of research, and it would take a lot of time.
Very time consuming, huh?
It was time consuming. And we didn't do as many programs. You know, we had, I think, one story time a week. There wasn't a lot of programming. During the summer, sometimes we would do more, but it's not like it is today. So the emphasis wasn't on programming, it was all on books.
So back
and
then,
information.
were there more staff members that you worked with since it was so time consuming?
It was, yeah, I had 2 full-time people that worked with me at the desk, and actually we had, and then other people that would also fill in that worked. It was a 2-story library, which is always tough because you always need extra staff to have people on both floors. And we had listening center. I don't know of any library that has a listening center nowadays, but that was downstairs in the young adult section where you could check out, you know, like a record, and you could put it on, you know, they would put it on the machine for you, and you'd get your headphones and you'd listen to the record in the library at this listening center. Nobody has that anymore.
Yeah. What was your fondest memory from those years?
I think just the fact that it was my first professional position and learning as much as I did. I don't know if I would, and the people I met and worked with, one of them is I'm still friends with her all these years later. And it was not my favorite job. It was probably my least favorite job because of our director. And by the time I left after 2 years, I swore I would never work in a library again.
So what was the most challenging part? I mean, you said it was the most difficult. What was so challenging about it?
Well, because the director didn't live up to my standards.
Okay.
I got the job. The reason that job was vacant was because he was having an affair with one of the library clerks. They were both married. And she did it because she thought she had to do that to get ahead. One of the librarians found out about it, Jane O, who was from Korea, maybe, Vietnam. He was not a native English speaker.
Okay.
And he told the library board. And the library board told the director to stop that. And when he found out who had told them, he made this guy's life so miserable that he quit. That's why I got that job. He was, I mean, the stories I could tell about this guy, he was about to kill some snails in his garden, and he swore they spoke to him and says, "Don't kill us, don't kill us." He thought they were fairies. He had the children's librarian come in one time and said, "These aliens have given me the plans for a rejuvenation machine, and I think that would be a great summer project for the kids for summer reading." And she had to say, seriously, that the kids are already young and would not be interested in that. Okay, so he was a little...
Yeah.
But he also, you know, we had this community person that would come in, had a newsletter on taking care of pets and places to go for free spaying. Well, one of the guys on the library board was a vet and didn't like that because, of course, he charged. He didn't want that. So we told the director that we could not offer this community newsletter anymore. And the director said, okay. And I thought that was totally wrong. You know, that was censorship. That was, you know.
So being that it was such a challenging time, what would you say was the best lesson you learned from that experience?
That teamwork is necessary because we didn't have much of that there, and that you had to get people to work together because we had cliques there, and I didn't like that. That meant it was just a lot of gossip. It was a bad atmosphere. So
you left after 2 years, and then where did you go?
I went to Europe for 10 months.
Europe?
I traveled for 10 months in Europe.
Okay.
And I actually would recommend that to everybody. It was the greatest experience of my life. Learned so much about the world, about people, about what I was really capable of doing. I mean, I can remember taking a bus from, I was going to go to Edinburgh, and the bus stopped in Carlisle. I was going to change buses. Well, it was like 2 in the morning. The bus station was closed. So I was sitting at a bench with my luggage, one light shining overhead, waiting for 4 hours for the next bus to come to take me to my destination. Now, any place else in this country, I'd probably have been scared to death, but it was not a big deal there. I felt very safe.
So what did you do? Did you work back there?
Did not work. I traveled.
You just traveled.
It was fun. It was educational. I went to tons of museums. I actually bought a car, so I drove in Europe. That was really amazing. And because I could either afford gas or a hotel room, I slept in my car. So I actually was camping And Europe is really nice. The big cities there, they have campgrounds on the perimeter, so you can camp there, and then you just take the bus into the city center to do your sightseeing.
And how old were you then?
I turned 25 while I was there.
25. You wanted to just explore
I
the
was
world
24
out there, huh?
and when I went there, and 25 when I got back.
What prompted you to want to do something like that?
I met somebody when I
Oh,
was.
a little romance, maybe?
No, not even that. This
okay,
was when I was when I finished at Santa Cruz, that summer institute. One of the people there was talking about going to Europe for an extended period of time. It never occurred to me that you could do something like that.
Yeah.
And so I thought, so it just kind of festered in my brain. When I was in Ontario, I went on vacation, I went to Mexico. I did a Club Med. Have you ever done a Club Med?
I have.
If you want a relaxing vacation, that's a great way to do it. And then I spent a week in Mexico City. And I realized I wasn't looking forward to going back to work. And I thought, in that case, I'm going to quit and go to Europe. And so I saved my money. I told my supervisor that I was going to leave. And I told her the date I wanted to do it. And she says, well, can you give me a couple more months so we can find your replacement? I said, oh, sure. So I was there until end of January or so, and I remember I flew out to, I landed in London on Valentine's Day, February 14th. It was cheaper to get a round-trip ticket than a one-way ticket, so I had a round-trip ticket, and I thought, well, I have 2 weeks to change my mind, and I just threw the ticket away.
So after your 10
months
stint in Europe, you came back?
I came back, it was right before Prop 13. So, and I got a job.
The Howard Jarvis years, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So I did some temporary work. That's what I would do when I was looking for a job in the library field. And I got a job at General Electric's Aviation Service Operation, which was behind the old Ontario Airport.
So you didn't go back to the library field right away?
But I was the librarian there. There was a library. There was really a filing clerk, but I was considered the librarian. I was one of maybe 4 women on the entire base. Really, it was all men, engineers. And that was when I found out about unions, because the unions were very strict, So I would get these boxes of updates. They would be like, like a Xerox box of paper. And my office was where I did all the stuff, I filed everything and updated all the manuals for the engineers, was on the 2nd floor. I would have to go to the downstairs office, grab the box, and haul it up myself. They weren't allowed to help me because it was outside of their job classification, and they would have gotten written up. That's actually when I decided I didn't like unions, because one guy came in one time and shot up the office with a gun of his supervisor, and he was not fired. The union protected him, and I thought—
They shot him? He was shooting?
They shot up his office.
His office?
Shot up his office. The supervisor wasn't there, but he didn't lose his job. And I thought, that's crazy. He had a gun.
Yeah.
Why wasn't he kicked out of the? Yeah, but that union protected him. So I met some really great people there. It was a really interesting time working there, and I realized I did not like working in a large company, because somebody asked me to apply for a job, and I thought, I don't want to work there. And so I got a job. That's when I left for Autographics, which was a library automation company. And I was there for 12 and a half years.
12 and a half years.
12 and a half years.
And what did you do there?
I created, so this is when technology is first starting. And
about what year would this have been, roughly?
Oh gosh, 70, I'm trying to think, 70.
And you're not even in your 30s yet.
No, I was still, I was probably 27 or 28 at that time, So we created microfilm catalogs. Instead of card catalog, it was on microfilm and microfiche. That's what we did. We actually had done printed catalogs. That's how the company started. It started out as a cold type printing company, and then they added on the automation part. They still did it. They had a couple of different divisions. One of them was the Bible division, and they still printed hard copy Bibles. They were the first company to figure out how to do a parallel Bible, where you had the different languages or the different versions of a Bible on the same page. They did that. So I started out as what they called a project manager, where I worked with different libraries and did, it was all computer stuff. This was back with cards. You had to type it on cards with the machine to create your computer deck. And if you had one little thing wrong, your job would fail, because this was all done on computers.
Yeah.
The computers ran 24 hours. The computer operators did 12-hour shifts, and they worked 3 days a week. So it was 24 hours. I remember I would go in at midnight to fix a job. I'd get calls.
Really?
I would tell them, you call me whatever. If this work doesn't work, call me. They would call me at 3 in the morning to say, yeah, the job failed.
Oh, wow.
It was, but I loved it. I've still, one of the people I met there we're still friends with. I moved up to become manager of the department. That's when I first had to fire someone. That's when I did my first hiring, learning to do that, and I was doing my first supervision.
So you did that for 12 years.
12 and a half
and
years.
And then you decided to move on.
Well, they had some changes in how they were running the company. My boss was laid off, was not laid off, fired, and ended up he ended up several years later getting hired back, and that's where he retired from. He got a job with another automation company in Huntsville, Alabama, and by that time I had a daughter, and he asked me if I would come back and work there, and I'm going, there's no way I'm raising a child in Alabama. So I turned down the job, but for the last couple of years I've been thinking I really wanted to do something that made more of a difference, that really helped people. And because a lot of the libraries around the area were my customers, Glendora was a customer, South Pass was a customer, a lot of the CSU campuses, when they changed vendors, I did, I actually did computer programming, and I created the specs for them to go from one vendor to another with their database, and we handled their databases. It was actually a really exciting time. I learned a lot. It was really stressful. And so there were a lot of libraries I didn't want to work at. I knew too much, how they operated, and I didn't like it. So there was an opening at Glendora Library, and actually somebody that I used to work with in Ontario was one of the people that applied. Both of us were applied. We were the 2 top candidates, and we both used the same person, my good friend Kay, who recently retired, who worked at Ontario as well, as the reference. And the reference she gave the director, that was Connie Tiffany then, was saying, well, if you want somebody that is a live wire and will question and will do things, then you want Jill. If you want somebody that will just do the work and be very steady and stable, you want Berta. And so she hired me. And I thought, wow, that was really cool. So
why do you suppose they called you the live wire?
Because I asked questions and I didn't always agree with things, and I would say if I didn't agree with something. And that's what she wanted. The director wanted somebody that would speak up and have ideas and would not always agree with her. She didn't want a yes man.
So what did you do in Glendora?
Glendora, I was in charge of public services, so I was in charge of the reference desk and the children's department, although I had a great children's librarian who is now the director at the Alhambra Library. And I didn't have to do, she took care of children. So some of the things that I did is, after working at Autographics, I was, to me, always cross-trained. It was very important that people knew that. So we had a 2-story library again, and support services, the person in charge of that changed it from technical services to support services, because she said, we're here to support you. So their staff worked upstairs, and then they would work at the checkout desk. And so I said, we all, part of it was we all need to know how to do everything, and we also need to work together. And so, and I had seen this when I worked at Autographics. We had started out in this 1-story building with no heat, by the way, and the air conditioning during the summer would rotate from room to room. And we moved to a new building that was 2 stories, and it made a huge difference in the company policy. We had separate restrooms for, the administration. So they had their own coffee break room. They had their own restrooms. Before we shared everything, we used to have free coffee and free hot chocolate. We all went to the same place. So I thought, I don't want that to happen. I don't want what happened at Autographics to happen, to be at Glendora. So all of my staff did some work upstairs, and we also worked at the checkout desk. So we all knew how to check out books, and everybody upstairs, we trained them to work at reference, so that there was a lot of cross training.
In talking to you, sounds like you've made a lot of friends along the way. Is the library industry a very tight-knit community?
We are. Well, there's the California Library Association, and I've been involved with that since even before, when I worked at Autographics. They asked me to speak about, about moving from one vendor to another, how to do that. So I've spoke at CLA at different workshops. I was very active in the Southern California Technical Processes Group, SCTPG, or Spaghetti as we called it. And I actually was president of that. And I created a lot of workshops. We did a lot of different things there. So when I started at Glendora, I saw this notice that the reference services section was reformatting as part of CLA, and they were having this meeting someplace at some library. I don't even remember where it was. So I thought, oh wow, that would be cool. I'll do that. So I went there. I was the only one that came in response to this news. And so I became part of the reference services section, which was a division of CLA, and started doing workshops for them, was president of RSS for a year. And so there's an annual conference, and people from all over the state meet. It's not just public libraries, but we'll have academic libraries come as well, and some special libraries. So you meet everybody. There's a lot of network going around.
So after Glendora, where did you go?
I came here.
Came here. Okay. Well, tell me
how did that happen?
How did that happen? How did it come about?
We had a strategic retreat for the managers.
In Glendora.
In Glendora.
Okay.
An all-day thing. In fact, I was cleaning up my office and I found my notes from that. And we were talking about where we were and what we wanted to do. And the observation I made is we're all ready for something new and different. And we had done some great things at Glendora. Our director was probably the very best director I've worked with. She was a visionary, and she inspired people to go above and beyond and to try different things. And so she ended up leaving and getting a job as director at Tuolumne Library. And Steve, who was our literacy coordinator, got a job at Corona Library. And
you all jumped ship?
No, actually Francie stayed and died of breast cancer like 2 years later after I left. It was very tough. And Anne, who was the circ supervisor, stayed until she retired. But I realized I really was ready for something different. And I saw, back then, job ads in the newspaper. So I saw an ad in the newspaper for Orange County, and they had a position open, the branch manager position at Cypress Library. And I interviewed for that, and I looked at where Cypress was, and it's the music collection, and they were doing a whole thing about cataloging their music collection, and going, I really don't like cataloging, and I'm not that into music, and I don't want that kind of a commute, so I'm not going to accept the job if they give it to me. And they didn't offer me the job. But then, because they hired someone and people transferred around, this position came open, so they asked me to apply for that. So I interviewed for that, and I'm thinking, La Habra. Now, at that time, I lived in Brea, and I'd been there for about 10 years. La Habra, actually, and I thought, where's La Habra? Is there a library in La Habra? So I applied for the position, and when they offered it to me, I found out where the library was, and I came here. Before I accepted, I came here, and I wanted to, and so the first thing I checked were the bathrooms, the public restrooms.
What would prompt you to look at the bathrooms first?
Because
see if there were books there?
No, to see how well it was taken care of.
Okay.
And one of the restrooms was clogged up. One of the stalls was clogged up. So I told the circ supervisor, the person at the checkout desk, about that. And then I kind of looked at the collection and I looked at the building. And before I left, I checked the restroom to see what they had done, and they had closed it off. Thought, okay, so they are taking, they're doing something about that. And then I talked to my family, and I asked my daughter, what do you think about my taking this job at La Habra? And she says, it's really close by, isn't it? I said, yes, it's like 7 minutes away.
And
now
where
it's
did you live? Where did you live then?
I live in Brea.
You live in Brea, okay.
So it's just, I live just north of Central. So it's just a straight shot here, and it was a 20-minute commute to Glendora.
So what date did you come here? What was your first day here?
It was March of 2000, March 6th, I think, of 2000. Well, the reason I took the job was my daughter said she wanted me closer. Now, my daughter was in junior high, and kids in junior high normally don't want anything to do with their parents, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that she still wanted me and wanted me close by, I said, okay, I'm taking this job.
Okay.
So my first day I walked in, I was scared to death. And I didn't know who this is. I had met the staff before. I'd asked to meet with the staff before I came on, so they knew who I was. And but I didn't remember their names. And I remember talking to Barbara Christian, who was our reference librarian, and I told her, well, I'm going to make some changes. And I thought, and she says, oh, no problem. And I'm going, oh, okay. That's a really good response. She wasn't worried about the changes. And we did. We made a lot of changes right from the start. And my staff has been the best staff ever. They have never said, oh, we don't want to do this. They've all said, oh, yeah, sure, let's do that. And then they come up with ideas of their own. So,
So tell me about the early years here. How was the library back then in 2000?
In 2000, we had just gotten computers, about half the ones that we have now, and people were desperate to get on. We had the internet. People were desperate to get on the internet. And when I say desperate, I mean we almost had. I trained the people outside because they would be there waiting, and I said, line up. So they knew they had to line up and walk in and walk to a computer. And if they ran, I made them go all the way outside and start again, because people were crazy. I mean, they just wanted to get on the internet, and they were really upset that they would only get an hour, because there was always a waiting list. There would be a 2-hour wait sometimes to get on these terminals back then. So that was probably.
And back then the terminals were much slower, I would imagine.
Oh
right?
gosh, yes, very slow. People would get frustrated and irritated. It was interesting. The second year I was here, we had a huge influx of these middle school kids that wanted to be in gangs, and they were terrorizing everybody. We were calling the police every afternoon, and the police would come, and we would call, and then the kids would come back in the evening, and we'd call the police again, and they could never come because they had other things to deal with. And it went on for months. My staff was upset. I had patrons that were upset. I had this one guy, huge, big guy, told me he didn't even want to bring his daughter here because of it. And finally, in the spring, a couple of things happened. One of them is we started our homework help program, and we rearranged the tables, not the way they are now. We had just them end to end all the way down so that the kids couldn't congregate around a single table. But they were also all being used for our homework help program, so they had no free space. And they started messing around with the police cars. So the police really cracked down on them. And that pretty much finally took care of the problem. One of the guys that was one of our issues is in jail now for murder.
Wow.
I know. It was. So
in the early years, there was a gang problem, kind of some
graffiti
thugs around
problem.
here.
Graffiti problem. I used to, our bathrooms were, they didn't have the tile walls they have now, and so people would graffiti them. I learned all about graffiti cleaner, and what I finally did is I got posters, free posters. Every place I went, I would grab posters, and I would just tape them up. And I figured so there was no place to graffiti, so they couldn't write on that. So, sometimes they would tear them or write on them or take them, and I didn't care. I would just put up more posters. I had tons of posters, and that was the way I could handle that.
Who was here at the library prior to you taking over?
Joy Johnson was here, and I think she was only here for maybe 1 year. Julie Fredrickson was here for 2 years, and then Terry Garza was here for 16 years. Okay.
So here in the early years, what is your fondest memory of the early years here at the Harba Branch Library?
Oh, I loved everything about being here, other than those middle school students that were. I had a great staff. I had a wonderful friends of the library. The city has always been very supportive and helped out. Sal has always taken good care of us. I loved working with the community and all the things that we got to do, and the fact that my staff is so open to doing new things. Like we started a book group. I told Barbara, let's do this. We worked with the city, the California Center for the Book, and started our first book group through their book kit in a box, and then we continued. We started a bilingual story time. My staff was all up for that. We started, we used to have monthly, remember the city used to give grants to the library, and we could do monthly programming for kids, and that grant died down, so we couldn't do that. But the National Charity League has been very generous for our summer reading program, and so we do our programming in the summer and get some great performers in there. I rearranged the collection. It was my idea. Barbara did it. because we used to just have fiction A to Z, and I said, let's pull the mysteries out. People who want to read mysteries want to find their mysteries. Let's pull the mysteries out. Let's pull the westerns out. Let's pull science fiction out, you know. So she did that. She pulled science fiction, she pulled fantasy. We had a separate short story collection, and I can remember, going out looking for a book, and this guy was standing there and says, if only you would pull the romance out, this would be perfect. I'm going, oh. So we pulled romance out, and we have a separate romance collection. I think we're the only branch that does in there. And it's mysteries and romance are our most popular genres. They check out like crazy.
Yeah. So in the early years, who were some of the people that you worked with in the community?
Barbara, in the community? Well, we have the Friends of the Library, Betty Fraser.
Betty Fraser?
Yeah, she was a big force for the library.
And where's Betty these days?
She has dementia, and she moved in with her daughter, and I think they've moved out of the area. I haven't heard anything. I sent a note to her like several months ago.
So Betty Fraser. Cell Handler, probably? Cell
Handler, yes, he was on the library board, another big library supporter. That's when it was his idea. We started this art contest with the Art Association, where we held a contest where we would have, for $400 we would buy the winning painting. So a lot of because one of my things was I wanted artwork in the library that represented the library or La Habra. And so we have a lot of pieces, not here, in the children's area, in different areas that were done by artists that represent either someplace in La Habra or represent reading or libraries. That's where we started that collection. That was his idea. And so I worked with him, Roy Ramsland. He has a miniature book collection. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know.
He did, yeah. He's and Gwen, who works at the post office and has been our Monday night bookstore volunteer since I've been here. She also has a miniature book collection. So we've we've displayed their collections a couple of times here in the library.
So, what is your fondest memory of your early years here?
Oh, wow. Being able to do story time. I did I started my ice cream story time in the summer. It's hard to come up with just one because it was just a great time to be here. Teaching internet, how to use the internet in Spanish. We were the first branch to do that. I took a class, and I was really worried about it when I got to the class because everybody there were native speakers. I learned in school, and I thought, I'm never going to be able to do this. But it turned out none of us knew the vocabulary for computers. We were all asking, well, how do you say screen in Spanish, pantalla? How do you say this in Spanish? How do you say that in Spanish? I thought, okay, I can do this. And my clerks at that time, the only people who spoke Spanish were our 3 part-time clerks. And so I grabbed one of them, and we did the classes on Saturday and Sunday before we opened. And the first several months when I did this, I would have them with me to help translate. What I found out is that everybody who came to that class, they spoke Spanish. They also spoke some English because they would help me when I was trying to explain something. They just didn't want the barrier of a language to keep them from learning this. And we started out with how do you use the mouse. We had mouse ejercicio, which it was like a game, and that's how they learned to use the mouse. After like 2 years, everybody knew how to use a mouse. Computers were that popular that they all knew how to use the mouse. But I taught them how do you use the internet? How do you look up things? And my fun thing, wanted them to learn fun things. This is mostly women taking the class. So I would say, let's look for a recipe for red enchilada chicken tortilla soup, which I had eaten at this restaurant in Prescott, and I have never forgotten that. It is like the best dish ever. And so they didn't realize there were recipes on the internet. They got very excited. And then I showed them, where did you live? I want them to, where did you live in whatever country you were from before? Because most of them weren't born here. And I would show them Google Maps where you could actually see photographs of their hometown. And I remember one person was practically in tears because he hadn't been back in so many years, and he could actually see photographs from his hometown.
Why do you suppose you've embraced the La Habra community so much?
Me?
Yeah.
They embraced me.
Yeah.
They were, always so welcoming. I can remember going to, I think, the shoe repair place or some repair place across the street. I needed a hole in one of my belt loops, and they knew who I was. They knew I taught the classes, and they just did it for me. They wouldn't take any money.
Yeah.
I think the community has always been appreciative of the programming we've offered and the services we've offered.
How have things changed here over the years?
Well, people have laptops, so now they're looking for outlets. We don't have fights to use the computers anymore. And people can get on and they can stay on for hours, and they do. But we don't have enough outlets. I've created a list, my wish list for the building, and that's been on that wish list since 2006, is more outlets, more wiring so people can plug in. We have our reference collection it used to be like three rows of shelving that was all reference. We're down to like 6 shelves. That's all we have. The rest of it, one of the things I wanted to do is the reference books weren't being used. And I said,
Right.
we spend hundreds of dollars on these books. They're not being used. So let's move them into the rest of the collection, let them check out, let them be used. And so that's one of the first things, one of the things that we did. Actually, when Sherry Toth, do you remember Sherry Toth, our children's librarian?
I don't.
She was our children's librarian for when I came here for years. And when Barbara, who had been a reference librarian for 35 years, this was the only library job she had, was the reference librarian here at La Habra, and she still volunteers here every Thursday. So when she retired, Sherry said she wanted to be the adult services librarian. I told her, you're going to feel like you've gone on vacation. And one of the things she did is we started weeding reference, and we started moving into the circulating shelves so people could check them out, and so it would be used. So we reduced that, and that's how we were able to create our young adult area. So Sherry, I kept telling her, you don't want to be a librarian forever. So she became a branch manager at one of our small branches, and then she moved to a larger branch, and then she moved to headquarters as the coordinator, programs coordinator, and now she's our assistant county librarian. So I'm really pleased about that. Working with the staff here, I think my job has been to give them the tools to do what they need to do so that they can achieve the most that they can achieve.
So why are you leaving, Jill?
Because they were going to transfer me to another branch.
And you had no say-so in that?
No, it's actually very flattering. The El Toro branch is in a huge Spanish-speaking neighborhood. There are only 3 branch managers that speak Spanish in Orange County, okay? One of them, it would have been a demotion for him to take that job because he's in a higher level. The other person is at a lower level, and they couldn't move him to the upper level, so that left me. Plus, they wanted me because they wanted my energy.
Okay.
And it was an hour away, and I had already planned, I turned 66 in July. I had already planned to retire next April. Actually, my real date was when they finished the construction here and opened it up. I wanted to be here through that because we were going to make a lot of changes to the branch. And so, you can't say no to a transfer.
Really?
And that's when I said, okay, I will retire in August, end of August.
Okay. What are you most proud of?
I think of my most proud of in terms of
here at the La Habra.
my staff and what they've done and what they've accomplished. Yay. No, really, I couldn't have done any of the things I had without the support of my staff and their ideas and their energy. This past summer, we had programming every single day. We had almost all of it done, and one of my LA's library assistants came over and she says, I want to do a STEAM program, where we do something different every week with kids. And I'm going, okay, when can we do that? We figured out Monday afternoon. So she came up, she had everything planned out, she did that. It was really popular. She did something with robotics. She wanted to do, like a science thing. We did an engineering thing. We did an art thing where we used conductive tape to create an art, just a drawing, but it created a closed electrical circuit that would light up an LED light. And then she did a math thing where they learned how to use an abacus, which I still don't know how to use, but yes, she was teaching the kids how to use an abacus. So it's ideas, some of the ideas like our 1,000 books before kindergarten. Kathy read about it and she says, let's do it. And I said, okay, what do we need? And she told me and said, we did it. We were the first branch to do that, and now it is a system-wide program. We did it for 2 years before it became system-wide. So that was her idea. We have, in fact, one of our other ideas is for Christmas, she puts out this little brochure, a book on the bed, that encourages parents on Christmas Eve when the kids are asleep to put a book at the foot of the bed, so when they wake up early in the morning they see the book and that's their first present, and hopefully they will stay in bed reading it before they wake up their parents.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when people ask you about the La Habra Branch Library, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that we are the heart of the community, that we are the one place everybody is welcomed, as long as they follow the rules, to be at. And they can, that we have air conditioning, so during the summer we are a cooling center. People can come here for that. If we have something for everybody from the time babies are born until they die. We have programs, we have books, we have resources. We have a digital collection, so the library is available 24/7. We've got e-books, e-audiobooks, e-magazines, and we've got music and movies you can download through Hoopla. We have, Ancestry.com available inside the library for people who want to do genealogy. We have, the programs we have a yoga class every Monday evening. We offer homework help during the school year. We offer volunteer opportunities for high school students, and I tell them, this is your first job. When you are volunteering at the library, this is a job, and this is something you can put on your resume, and it's going to teach you the skills that you need to be a successful, person in your, business life. So we have a huge teen volunteer program here at the library. We have adult volunteers that contribute to the library. We did an inventory of our collection in, I think, 2006, okay? And they did it at a couple other branches with library staff. We were the first and only branch that did the inventory with community volunteers. We had 99 community volunteers that came in and inventoried the entire collection. It was Barbara's first week of retirement. So she left on Thursday, and she was one of those people that didn't come in early in the morning. She would come in late and just take a shorter lunch. She was here at 8 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Thursday, because she would do the hard parts of the inventory when we had things that didn't come up in the collection. So,
what legacy do you leave behind here?
I think I leave a legacy of really dedicated staff people, and a dedicated friends group, and a library that's responsive to the needs of the community, that is there for the community.
And what kind of staff does this library have? I mean, in terms of how many people do you have?
Well, we have 2 librarians, Kathy and Marcos.
Okay.
Marcos, who speaks Spanish, is truly bilingual. We have 3 part-time library clerks, 2 of whom are bilingual. We have, how many LAs? 4 LAs. I'm trying to think. David, Karen, Jessica, and Daniel. And all of them speak Spanish. Now, I think that one of the legacy is, as I said, when I first came here, only 3 of our part-time clerks spoke Spanish. Now, every single person, except for 2, speaks Spanish.
One of the things that you have embraced is working with the La Habra Historical Museum. So what have you learned a little bit about the history of La Habra?
I learned about the camps, that they called the red camp and the blue camp. I didn't know that. I learned that we never grew corn in La Habra, but we certainly, grew avocados and citrus, and that La Habra Heights is where the Haas avocado, my favorite avocado, was developed. We had Mark from the Chamber of Commerce speak at our annual meeting last year.
Yeah,
and he talked about the 10 things he didn't know about La Habra. So I learned about Monkey Island. Some of the beautiful houses that we had here, the gorgeous houses, we have some of those photographs up that aren't here anymore. That it's such a shame that we didn't keep those, that we had that, we were an agricultural community first. I learned about Wilson School. Cruz Reynoso went to Wilson School. He was, who Cruz Reynoso was?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Supreme Court Justice.
Right, and he actually spoke here at the library several years ago. What else did I learn? The Depot Theater.
Yeah.
the Children's Museum, one of the first children's museums, started by Robin Young and her mom. And Robin and I are still friends, by the way. She's moved
out of the area?
She's moved to where is she at? South Carolina, back east in this kind of the South area, but close to Washington, D.C. And I've learned about the history of this library, that it started out it started out in a bank.
Well, that's a great, tell us about the history
So the
of the
La
library.
Habra Women's Club decided they needed a library, and so one of the banks gave them the second floor, and one of the husbands built a bookcase, and they opened up with 50 books, 25 adult books and 25 children's books. And then when they outgrew it, we bought a building. It was a tamale restaurant. And it was moved, I think, to this area, and the Laniers, am I pronouncing that right?
Okay.
I think donated the
Yeah,
land
right.
and built the steps for that building. And we had that for quite a number of years. And I have a picture of that old first library in the lobby.
Okay.
And then through the WAPA program, we built where the Historical Museum is. That was the library. City Hall was right next to it. So one of the other things I learned, because I remember looking at the picture going, well, there's a street there. And there's no street. What happened to where's the street? And I finally looked in one of our own phone book, old phone books, and it has a map. And it shows that Erna went all the way through here, because there was no civic center.
Right.
The library was here. The City Hall was right here with the jail, because somebody working in the clerk's office could actually talk to people in the jail.
Wow.
And so that was there for many years, and then they decided, well, this whole civic center, and Main Street also came all the way through, right? Okay, so they decided to build the civic center, and we decided to build a new library. And there were, of course, lots of people who didn't want a new library, didn't think we needed a new library, and lots of people who did. And the Friends were the ones that were really instrumental in fundraising and getting the support to build this particular building. And this building originally ended where that brick wall is.
Yeah.
We're in the new part of the library.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, how many years ago was it? 1980s, I think.
Yeah.
We added on this part.
This whole wing over here.
This
came
whole
on
wing
board.
over here.
The adult books were on the other side,
That's
right?
right, which is where our patio is. And of course, when that whole thing opened, that patio, we've never been able to fully utilize it because there's no supervision. And so one of the things I would really like to do is take that wall down, because I have homeless now that are using it at night, and even during the day we're constantly chasing people out. I would love that wall down to a seating height so that it can be an open area, so that when these townhomes are built, we didn't want to do it before because the police said it would be a homeless magnet. But with these townhomes, that when they open up, there's they're going to be right there. There's no wall between us and the townhomes. It can be part of a park type area, an amenity. So that's one of the things I would like to do.
What has perked your interest so much about the history of La Habra?
Because it is such a fascinating town. I mean, really, think about what we've done. I actually have one of the orange crate labels for La Habra at home. Okay. That I didn't get it for Brea. I got it for La Habra. The fact that there is the volunteerism in this. I think Rosa Espinoza was saying that we are the community, a caring community, and I have seen that here with the volunteerism that we have. With the community really is a caring community. The nonprofits, I had no idea when Kent Roberts created that book years and years and years ago of all the nonprofits. I had no idea there were so many nonprofits in this town, and there are.
We have one of the largest group of nonprofits in La Habra, one of the largest per capita of churches at one time.
Absolutely, and I think the churches are another great source of volunteerism. The I Love La Habra cleanup days, why is that so successful? It's because of the community.
Now, how would Jill Patterson like to be remembered?
As someone who really believed in the library and what it can offer the community. For how how we opened this library to the community, and that I supported the staff and gave them the opportunities to go as far as they wanted to go.
Fill in the blank. Jill Patterson is?
A librarian. before a branch manager, I'm a librarian. I believe in the value of libraries and what they can offer the community. When I was going through my photographs, I found one about, what is the library worth and how it's used. And I looked at that and going, that is still true today. How important we are to the community. People who are job hunting come here. I had one woman that had been job hunting for ages, found the job through using the computers here. So people come here for job hunting. Nobody can, I certainly can't afford to buy all the books I want to read, and I really count on the library for my reading. The programs that we offer, when there's a need, as I said, we still offer tech classes for adults, drop-in basis, one-on-one, on how to use your device or how to do something on a computer. We still offer that. Encourage literacy, our literacy program for adults is an important part of what we do, and literacy for children.
So what does the future hold for Jill?
Well, I'm going to CLA this in November, so I'm doing 2 workshops. I'm doing a workshop on how to emotionally prepare for retirement, and I came up with that idea last year when I had planned to retire in April. So now I'm going to be able to talk about it.
So are you emotionally prepared to
No. I said I am so, I had lunch with a former colleague of mine, the former branch manager at Brea, and I said, I finally realized what I want. I want to be retired because of all the things I want to do, and I want to be the branch manager at La Habra. Can't I do both? And no, you can't. So what she told me, she says, think of yourself as a steward for the library, that you're handing this library over to the next person in really good condition.
Has a succession plan been established already?
They opened the recruitment in August. It closed on the 17th, so last Friday. So the next step is to go through all the applications. 3 people at headquarters will interview everyone, and I think they create an A and B list. And then the second interviews will be for specific. There are 3 branch openings right now.
What advice would you offer the person that's going to step in your shoes?
Think big. Support your staff. Listen to them. Because you can't have all the ideas. My staff came up with more ideas than I ever did. Listen to the community. Find out what they need and meet their needs.
And what message would you like to give the community now that you're leaving?
Don't leave the library. Despite the problems with parking, find a way to get here and use it. We created a little bookmark to hand out at the townhomes. I talked to one of the sales reps there, and I starts out with the smartest card in your wallet is your library card. It opens the doors to everything.
What message would you like to leave your staff?
Keep dreaming big, and don't think this is your last job. Think bigger. A lot of my staff have gone on to become branch managers, and higher. Well, Beatrice, who is my adult services librarian, is now the programs coordinator at headquarters.
You love reading books. If there was a book written about Jill Patterson, what kind of book would it be?
Say Yes to Life.